Welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We had the privilege to be a part of the Industrial Athletic Trainers Society Virtual Networking Symposium again this year. And this year we had a discussion with Susan Taah, who is the president of the IATS, and we focused on leadership, which is a topic that is very important to me and one that I love learning about and constantly rethinking and trying to come up with just the best ideas that I can and how to implement it and actually practice it. So we get deep into some of the details of leadership, what Susan thinks is important, what's worked, how we approach it similar, how we approach it differently. And it was just a really fun discussion. Brought up in this was some of the work and things we do with Clinically Press, our 501c3 nonprofit that we focus on raising money to donate inflatable cold tubs, AEDs, and other emergency equipment. If you feel so inclined, please go check it out, clinicallypress.org. A ton of resources there. We offer free CEUs in partnership with AT Corner, To the Bone, Midwest Concussion Clinic, and others to help you get your CEUs. We also have paid ones that we believe are very, very affordable. Bunch of free resources. Please go check that out, and if you feel so inclined, help us on our cause. At minimum, 85% of all donation goes directly to funding things, with our goal being 100% once we hit operational targets for the year, which thankfully we are already well on track for that. So please check that out and enjoy this conversation. Well, we will get into things. So thank you, everybody, for joining us for this part. My name is Luedke. I'm an athletic trainer, not currently in the industrial setting, but have been thankful and lucky enough to be included in this event for the last, I think this is year 3. And then in normal fashion, Susan and I usually connect about 2 weeks prior to this actually happening, just confirming that I'd be interested in doing it. And then the week before, we hammer out the topic and kind of how we want to do things. And so we are right on schedule with that this year as well. So thank you again to Susan and the Industrial Athletic Training Society for letting me be a part of this. As we were going around talking about what we wanted to cover, what we thought would be a good topic, leadership came up. And that is something that is always forefront of most people's minds, in life and work and just the profession in and of itself. Susan and I have definitely gone back and forth on different ideas just over the course of time as we've seen things pop up and conversations we've had. Leadership is something that I have evolved in my thinking over the years on and continue to do so. But it really is such an important thing. So what we were going to focus on today is just kind of our own personal takes on leadership, tie it into some of the work that the Industrial Athletic Trainer Society is doing, things that I've experienced and am doing, and then kind of just try and hopefully drop a couple gems that people can take away. So in the process, please use the chat. I've got it up. If something comes up, we can help use that to help guide the conversation, questions or comments. And then at the end, we'll definitely leave some time for any specific questions. So I'm going to throw just lob this one out there for Susan on the how do you define leadership? What is your take on leadership? Just in general, and then if you want to get into any of specific to IATS, or we can hold that for a little bit later.
Like a broad definition?
Yeah, just
Man,
how it impacts you.
I would say, to me, when I'm thinking of how I see leadership and people who lead, right? Because I think for most of us, at least for me, my personal view of leadership is just mostly impacted by people that I see as leaders. And I would say that these are kind of people who use their talents to serve other people, right? They see a way that something can be better, and they decide to apply their gifts to making that thing better. I think these are people who don't wait for change to happen. They kind of take that initiative and decide that they're the one. And this can be something small. Maybe you see an opportunity at work, a process that's not ideal, and you choose to champion that change. To me, you're a leader in that. Maybe you see a group who isn't being served and has needs, and you decide to serve them or meet those needs. I think you're a leader in that. So I think it's ultimately just the people who decide to fill gaps, and that can be in any setting. And that's often going to be through service. But without those people, I don't think we'd have a lot of the things that we rely on today. So definitely. What do you think? Joel, this is a great conversation because you are like the AT leader guru. I don't care if you don't want that title. You have a whole journal dedicated to us learning the ways that we lead and being able to kind of think through how we resolve conflict and things like that. And a lot of your branding, those of you who were in the branding conversation earlier this morning, I would say your brand really revolves around leadership. So I'm definitely interested to hear how you would define this.
Yeah, I kind of go about it. Two main things that I usually talk about, two and a half. Leadership is hard. I just want to throw that out to start. It's not an easy thing. There's a quote by Simon Sinek, who's the Start With Why author, if you haven't heard of him, and he had a book called Leaders Eat Last, which I think is where I pulled this from. But the quote is leadership is not a license to do less. It is a responsibility to do more. And that's the trouble. Leadership takes work. It takes time and energy. The effects are not always easily measured, and they are not always immediate. Leadership is always a commitment to human beings. And so just what you were already saying about the serving aspect of that is essential. And I think that is where leadership is and needs to continue to go, is that service type model of, yes, people should be thankful they're employed, but employers should be thankful that they have employees. And it's a two-way street there. It's not one serving the other, because that's the other one that I get on a little bit of a high horse on with it. And this has come up more recently as I've transitioned. I saw it in athletics, definitely. I see it more in hospital and clinic settings. To me, everybody can be a leader, and everybody should try and demonstrate leadership characteristics. Everything that Susan just said about finding something and taking ownership of it and going to it, absolutely couldn't agree more. But I think leadership, or leader in and of itself, is a title that's earned and given. You can't just self-impose that on you. The mentality, absolutely. But if you're the head of a large, or any type of organization, doesn't have to be large, if the people that you are leading, in quotes, don't consider you a leader or their leader, then I don't know that you technically are. And it would drive me nuts to no end when administrative positions, who have the title, absolutely, never just referred to themselves as administration. It was always leadership. And I understand what they mean, but it just hits me a little bit the wrong way, because I think you're missing it by just using the title, but not necessarily always knowing how much people that you are leading are actually may not appreciate what you're actually doing. So to me, this comes back to, if anybody's a basketball fan, there used to be the And One mixtape, and they did this tour, and they had all these guys with, crazy nicknames. There was Hot Sauce and Helicopter and Escalade. They had all these things. But if you got invited onto the tour because you were good at street ball, you didn't get to pick your nickname. It was bestowed upon you by people that had been there before and had built this thing. And I think leadership is a lot the same with that. And so leadership doesn't always mean you have to have that administrative title. you can lead where you're at, absolutely 100%. But being an administrator doesn't automatically mean you're a leader. And that's something I learned in particular in my career working in athletics, and really changing my focus on that. And just because I had an assistant AD title didn't make me any more special as a leader if everybody thought I sucked at my job. So, or just didn't actually lead them. So those were kind of my big ones that I think get lost, where we potentially get to that leadership or administrative level where we're pulling a title down, but missing the rest of that.
No, I 100% agree. And especially like you were saying, I think we get caught up in the rankings of things, right? And kind of like what you said about the corporate world and how we have all these titles. And honestly, if I've seen anything, sometimes when you have people at these very high levels, it's not so much that they're doing more, like they're just able to delegate and push more on other people, right? And obviously that's part of the design of things, but truly your leaders are going to be people who can carry a lot, do a lot. And I know one thing that we had kind of discussed was kind of the traits of leadership. And you'll really see it when teams are in trouble, right? And who is going to bail us out? And you either have that person in that role, you're hoping they are a leader, because if they are, hopefully they have the capacity, right, to get this team out of trouble. And you really can see the foundation start to crack if they're not, and the team develop opinions about how qualified their leader may be if they don't have that capacity. So that's definitely a great point.
Now, within that, and Susan's just on point with the segues, one of her topics she had was the 7 leadership traits. And if you could just list those off, I'd be curious. I honestly, I can probably guess a good handful of them, but I don't know if I've seen that the 7 specific. So I'm curious as to exactly what they are. And then if anybody else has other ones that they'd want to chime in with in the chat, please do.
So these are the 7 leadership traits that we came up for our leadership, right? And this was like kind of like the min specs. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with minimum specs, which is like, you cannot be good at this without this. It's less saying like aspirational, right? So everyone wants groundbreaking, like, everyone wants some of the high bar kind of stuff. But really what this was seeking to accomplish, and it's kind of something that I really want to reinvigorate, especially in an organization, is you need to possess these traits to help us as an organization move forward, right? And make sure we can accomplish our goals. So one of them, which is an obvious one, is being an effective communicator, right? So that to us means you're organized and highly responsive. This means it's not 10 days before we hear back on something. If we communicate something out, have you read the materials and you understand what was discussed, even if you missed a meeting or missed something, you're caught up, right? Are you a person that we're constantly catching up, right? That's a minimum expectation to be an effective communicator. And no organization can survive if people are not responsive and people aren't organized. And then number 2 is accountable and dependable. So follows through on commitments, meaning if something is in your court, it's going to get taken care of. So what I'm looking for with that is, am I going to come back to you on the date that this thing was due and ask about it, and you totally forgot about it? And either you're not able to deliver on it, or you're like, oh, I can try and deliver on it by tomorrow, right? That's not dependable, right? So no organization, and you'll see this, I'm sure, in any team. I feel like we're probably thinking through times at work, right, where you're like, yeah, that should be a minimum expectation of my team. Life would be great if people were accountable for the commitments that they made. One that maybe people wouldn't automatically think of, but it's one that we had put on ours, was a positive attitude. And when we said a positive attitude, I kind of like extra defined this, because it doesn't mean we're always optimistic. And I think that's something critical. Like, sometimes we just got to be realists and be like, this is not going the way we expected. But what positive attitude means, in the way we use it, is empathetic and altruistic with concern for others. And really what it was saying is the minimum expectation of not having people who breed negativity. You may not always be the most optimistic person, but are you empathetic to people's situations and concerns? Do you generally want goodwill, right? And for others to do well. And that may be a good way to get out people who may be selfish or entitled, or, you know, maybe use others as stepping stones for themselves. We really want people who are positively geared towards the mission and enjoy the people, the human aspect, right? Like you brought up when you were talking about Simon. And then forward thinking and creative. And that can go for anyone, right? But what we were trying to get rid of was the how it's always been done mentality as a small and nimble organization. And then one that was really important to me was flexible, which we said is adapting in a meaningful way. Our organization is too small to be rigid. I would say athletic training is too important of a profession to be rigid. Flexibility is our strong suit. We call ourselves the Swiss Army knives, right? And there's being flexible and being adaptable, and there's adapting in a meaningful way, which means, does it help you accomplish what it was that you wanted to accomplish? And then our last two were strong work ethic, so setting and achieving goals, which goes back to my, what is your capacity? Again, as a leader, you just have to be able to carry more. And I know life comes, right, and happens to all of us. We all go through ups and downs. Work has been so crazy for me lately. And you really learn your capacity, which comes from self-care. So I'm a big self-care person. I don't believe in running yourself into the ground. I think there are people who are naturally able to carry more than other people, right? And leaders, we should see that as an opportunity to support those people, right, and help them out. Then our last one is a self-starter. IATS was a self-starting adventure, right? We existed, kind of just spawned as a place for industrial ATs to be able to socialize and pool resources together, you know, sharpen each other and support the growth of the setting. And that means that we can make something happen out of nothing. We can work with little direction, right? We can produce without being given kind of a roadmap. Because we know hopefully years from now, there will be a roadmap for other people. And that's the point, is how are we going to support people who need that roadmap? By being a self-starter and making it and building that thing. So those are our leadership traits. And again, I think anyone who has those qualities, call me up. Send me an email. I'd love to talk to you, but those are really critical, I think, in getting the leaders that we want inside.
Yeah, I think those are fantastic, and kudos to you guys for spending the time on it. The only thing I can think of, and I think it would fit in, it's just maybe in different words, is personally for me, I think one of the biggest characteristics I've had for anybody is like, oh, what's the most important characteristic of a leader? And kind of circling back, humility is one to me that really is important. The know what you don't know, being open to things. I think in a lot of instances, you know, as you have mentioned, Susan, you know, leaders need to be able to understand and carry a lot. And while you employ people or you work with people, you volunteer with people that bring unique skills to the whatever it is, the initiative or the workplace, as that leader, you still have to have an understanding about what they do. Because if you don't, you're going to probably run yourself into problem. And that's part of the hard work. Now, again, you are absolutely should defer when needed, but if you don't have that base understanding, you're going to put yourself in a tough spot, because then you're just second guessing without actually totally knowing what's going on. And I'm sure everybody has run into some version of that with a boss who just truly doesn't understand what you do. And then when you're trying to solve a problem and they're not utilizing your opinion, this would be my plea that if you get into that leadership role or administrative role, don't do that to somebody else, essentially.
No, definitely. And I think that that could even go into for these traits, we like to ask people if they have these things, right? And maybe it'd be difficult to ask if someone's humble and see how we're like, gotcha,
Yeah.
go ahead. But I think curiosity is kind of a bit of what you're describing,
Absolutely.
right? If you have a healthy sense of curiosity, I think we've seen leaders who are just not interested. They're not curious. Like, they couldn't tell you 50% of what's going on in the team. So
Right.
you definitely want that healthy curiosity where you are inquiring in a healthy way, right? In a positive way that people don't feel like they're under a microscope, but you're curious about what your team needs, what they do and their position and so on with that. Like, that's definitely, because you'll find ways and you'll find things that you don't even know. And that's that lifelong learner part of leadership. Man, there's so many gaps. I was like, you really learn how little you know when you go on the leadership journey. I tell people, like, I don't even pretend to, like, I'm so good now. Leadership has taught me to be so good at identifying when I don't know something and be like, I do not know the answer to that. That is such a gap. I think before I started down this path, I would really try to kind of fudge something out. Sure. It is such a waste of time. Oh my goodness. And leadership has definitely taught me to say, oh no, I didn't think of that. Like, please tell me more. And it's so relieving to just continuously learn from people who see it in a way that you don't.
So you talked about, with this, what you're looking for to bring people on, who are interested in serving in board positions, committee positions, the whole thing within IATS. Once you've kind of identified them, how do you, as the person that, kind of spearheaded the start of this, and others, if they want to chime in a little bit as well, continue to drive that forward and, hold that accountability? Because it is extremely easy, to take on a lot, forget that you had something coming up. As somebody who's done state service, it's happened to me. I tend to have too many irons in the fire myself. But how do you continue to instill those in? Chris Proctor had a nice just message in the chat about, finding people that are particularly talented, and encouraging and empowering them to use those talents within, yet still having it fit within the core mission of what's going on. That was a lot. Pick it apart how you will.
No, definitely. That is actually a great shout out. Feeding off what Chris said, really encouraging people to run with things, right? I think the great thing that I've really appreciated about our leadership has been that they create. And you need people who can create when you are the type of organization we are in the position we are. There are things that I've opened my eyes and they exist. Community with the mentorship, the work they've done on our mentorship program, and now they're doing some other things for our members and engaging with them. Advocacy with the master program outreach, right? I don't know if Lex is on here, but I think they've talked to like definitely over a dozen, probably near 20 schools this past semester. I think like 40 something reached out, and it's really fitting within their schedule and stuff like that. I did not do any of that. And it kept happening. Like, I've been so busy with getting this summit going, and every now and then I would like see an email pop in to the central society email, and it's like, oh, like, thanks so much for hosting us, like, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, like, I keep seeing they're just happening, right? And that's truly kind of like Chris said, like, give them the space to create. And sometimes you need to kind of come in and say, like, is this working, right? What are our goals? Analyzing that fit. And especially as we grow and have more resources and we start making decisions about how we're using that resources consistently with what ATs want, then those questions come into play with us saying, hey, we've seen this is kind of dropping off. How can we, light a fire under this again and keep it going? Or what gaps we see? But man, it's been so amazing giving them space to create and solve problems. As ATs, we know a lot of the problems that exist here, and one person can't do it all, no matter how much you can carry. You need capacity, right? But we're not we're not superhuman. And it's been incredible just seeing our leadership use their skills in unique ways to solve problems.
Yeah, this is one that identifying, who is doing what and what their aspirations are and what their ideas are and the type of personality they are is one that I learned longer than I wish I would have in hindsight. But I came into my first, again, quote, leadership role, administrative head AT job at 27. I didn't know anything in hindsight, but had all these ambitions of, doing all this great stuff and, trying to, assign things to people, get them to do stuff. And this was coming into an org. I didn't get to hire everybody who was there. Everybody was held over, which is not uncommon, obviously, in a lot of settings. But I believe it was Kim Scott who wrote the book Radical Candor, referred to there's kind of two types of employees, both extremely important. There's your superstars and there's your rock stars. And being able to identify that in people can be really useful because then it can help temper your expectations and maximize what they are wanting to accomplish as well. So the superstars are everything Susan just described. They're the ones that want to take on a new initiative. They're going to just take it and run with it and go. And sometimes your biggest issue might be you just got to pull them back a little bit, or at least make sure you're in the loop, so you know what's going on, because they just want to run. They will do stuff out of hours. That's, these superstars. It's just kind of their mentality. And they're obviously important to have on your team. The rock stars are the people that will definitely get everything done, but they are really good at their core job and function. That's what they want to do. That's what they want to focus on. And that's what they want to be theirs. They're not necessarily looking to make that next huge step or move in their career or advancement or whatnot. Could be at a different phase in their career, but it's just a different personality. And again, extremely important. And so for me, being able to identify that in some of my staff switched how I would potentially be like, hey, what is your interest? And is this something that we can do? What is the timeline? And then that would get accomplished by that rock star because that was their thing. And I just knew I had to adjust what I thought my timeline needed to be in order to get it done. And it made everything work so much more smoothly. It made me relax a little bit. They didn't feel like they were under some pressure to do something that they weren't necessarily looking for in their role. Whereas the superstars, again, it was, hey, let's take this and run. We'll double back however often we need to and make sure it's good. So you have to treat everybody fairly, obviously, but I think treating everybody equal in terms of responsibilities or what their ambitions are, you've got to be very aware of that in those administrative positions because not everybody's looking for the same thing. And being able to identify that and just asking people can be huge, because if people want to come and do what's on their job description, that's what you hired them for. If they maximize that might be everything you can ask, and that's perfect. But then again, don't miss out on identifying those other ones that can really to help you take what you're doing to the next level.
Now, is there a chapter on when the superstars are doing everything but what's in their job description?
I mean, I feel that one too.
I've definitely seen that. I'm like, hey, love this manual on healthy eating. Where's your report? It was 4 days ago. I get it. Yep. Where is it?
Yeah, no, I understand that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out, because I could already tell you the superstars and rock stars in my group on my team at work for sure.
Yeah, again, it was just one of those things, identifying it, and it helped put me in a better place of really figuring out what was the best way to go with each person. And that was one, again, talking more along those superstars, but all the way back to your initial thoughts on leadership, servant. I think for me, the idea of servant leadership combined with transformational leadership, i.e., you're really focusing on your employees and what their goals are and what they are trying to accomplish. is truly important. And the more you can blend those together, the better it is. And that was one I also tried to figure out. And I haven't been in a position in the last 4 or 5 years of my career where I've had the opportunity to do this. But if I am again, it's definitely something I'm going to focus on, is find out what those people's goals are and what they maybe want to focus on. But then how does that tie into you in that administrative / leadership role? What's your bigger vision for the department or the group? And can you leverage what they're interested in and support them in that to ultimately help obtain the goals that you're looking for? And I think it's not a manipulative thing. It's not trying to do any of that. It's just the best of both worlds if you're able to then help guide them and let them know what you're looking at, because that could spur them into some different thought processes as well. And that, thinking about what you were just saying about people taking off with it and you just looking back at the emails going, this is wonderful. But it fits into what I've from the outside understand as the bigger goals of this society.
No, definitely. And that ties back to the human aspect of things, right? I mean, I tell people this society could disappear, your company could disappear. Odds are you're still going to exist and you still have goals and dreams and plans, right? So, and I'm very transparent about that, even with my work team, right? Is I'm like, you're a person to me first. And my team has such vibrant ideas and lives and histories and just, I mean, so many cool things about them. And we obviously work with some very interesting populations, and we have an awesome patient group. And that to me is the crux of it all. And I would say even there are times when there isn't that parallel, right, between what the company may be trying to accomplish or even our organization. But that person still has those goals, and maybe there are still things that they can learn. They're going to help them get closer to that thing that they want, even if it's with a different organization. And I think true leaders are still going to use what that person has to offer, give them the space to learn those skills, and still support the eventual growth of these human beings. I think it's probably a quote lingering out there somewhere, but that idea of the company that doesn't want to invest in any training for their people because they're like, oh, we trained them, then they're going to leave us, right? And the guy's saying, okay, so you don't want to train them and have them stay, right? Like, is that the goal? And that doesn't make anything better for anyone. So I think ideally when you have good leaders, they look beyond and they look at what we are accomplishing as people on this earth, and having teams that you can invest in individually no matter what, and that everything isn't transactional. It's not linked to what is the company going to get out of helping you, right? But what are your goals and how can we assist with them? And if we can, we will. And I think it's nice to be in those environments. They may not be as plentiful as we'd like, but it's nice to be in them.
Yeah, I think it was off of it's a free advertisement for a Capital One commercial where it was somebody who was like the director of marketing and was going to lose an employee because they found another opportunity. And instead of trying to figure out, all the ways to help them get there, they encouraged them to go and do it. Because with the whole thought process is go learn some new skills. And when the time is right and I've got the position, I'm going to hire you back because I know what you brought to the table. And so just having that mindset of letting people do those things, knowing that could ultimately come back to benefit you in the long run is important.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll take a subtle shift here because one of the other topics that we came up with is the approach to kind of AT service. And, with how the Industrial Athletic Training Society came up, some of the things that I am doing currently with a nonprofit that I and a buddy and our board run, mainly just kind of the two of us, but two very different paths, and we kind of are just going at different approaches. And we just wanted to talk about that, neither one is right nor wrong, but just kind of how it goes about. So if Susan, you want to start off just kind of filling in, why you guys decided to take the route you did and why that was important specifically to the Industrial Athletic Trainer Society.
Yes, yes. Man. So we had a lot of conversations as a board about how we were going to go about membership. Um, so when the society started, I had a little bit of a seed that like started us up, right? So that money wasn't an issue in the very beginning because you always hate to like I feel like you're scrimping and scraping. Now it was not a lot of money. It was only a couple $1,000s, but it was enough to start the idea and see where we would go from there. And as we discussed where we wanted to be financially and how that aligned with our goals, right? I think sometimes people think that when money is attached to things, that becomes a negative thing, right? Um, I personally disagree, and research disagrees on a lot of things, right? When people have a
Sure.
little buy-in to something, they're more likely to show up. I will say VNS this year, we blew the numbers off the charts with our attendance. I think your average attendance for a free event is like 30% or like 1/3 will show up. And we had more than half, which people might think that's low. That is incredible for a free event. People aren't paying. The odds of them showing up can be very limited. So this year was truly amazing in what we were able to achieve with that. Um, but people think that money has a negative connotation. And there's like that quote, depending on how well read you guys are, you'll know who it's from. But the idea that capitalism breeds the alienation of man. And when we chose our membership model, we kind of went for the more premium side of things. I think people would say, and people would agree with that, with how our membership currently sits. But we didn't do that to alienate anybody or to exclude, right? I hope the people who are listening would agree that we really seek to create community and be very inclusive. And we have a lot of open resources for people. But what we wanted to do with our membership was identify our stakeholders and push them to take ownership of bettering this setting, bettering this profession. And that's what we wanted to use our membership for. We try to continue to encourage our members to realize they have an investment in the future of industrial, right? And that looks different to all of them. And we try to put the onus on them, tell us what that looks like, communicate with us, show up, find ways to give back. And that's really kind of where our approach came from. And I will say we've done a good job. And even with that, and the fact that everyone who attends our stuff isn't a member, we've worked really hard to create a really rich environment. And the people who are a part of our events hopefully see and feel positivity. VNS is the most positive AT event that I ever attend every year. It is so amazing seeing all the communications, everyone chatting. We have a prompt at the beginning where we try to make it a positive one so that we put them in that that headspace when they jump in of highlighting. So this year it was introduce yourself and share your champion moment, right? Because NATA's theme this year was healthcare champions. And so it started them on that like strain of positivity. But yeah, I know with your work with Clinically Pressed and stuff, they're definitely different sides of things, but that's part of why we chose kind of what people would consider more of a premium membership model. But now we're in a position where we're truly looking at ways that we can continue to invest. And we thank our members every chance we get because, again, they make everything that happens here possible. And we love that. And we hope they feel that they are a stakeholder and they have some ownership in what we do.
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple things that are really important that even before and now in the model you have is you demonstrated a ton of value prior to turning on membership. I remember us having a couple of discussions back and forth about how you're like, we don't have a membership fee yet. We're just doing the thing. And you kind of shared that story. And so you already showed, here's what the plan and the goals are. And here's what you can already glean from it if you kind of come along for the ride. And then to what you said, just now thanking your members and truly providing the value back and doing so back to all your leadership traits before potential rumblings of, well, what am I getting out of this? Like, how is it actually helping me? And that humility to always be driving forward to hopefully never get to that point of where that is, and that reinvestment and the communication and just the transparency of, here's what we're doing. If there's I could imagine if you all take on some big initiative that might be a stretch goal or a reach, you probably share that with membership saying, hey, we might be taking a risk, but here's the ABC reasons why we're going to try and get it done, and why we're utilizing what the funding you're providing this to do. And I think that is immensely important, because if even in that case, if it doesn't work out, nobody feels duped by it, or, that they were just like in the dark, and that can be huge for just creating that buy-in and that, the repeat customer. There's a book, I haven't actually read it, but it's been referenced more times, and it was basically going back to, like, you can't always be focusing on acquiring new. You gotta stay and focus on who you already have. They're already giving you their support, whether it's contract, dues, whatever it is. You can't forget about them and just focus on acquiring more. I think you guys have a very strong foothold in that, and it's really, really important.
No, 100%. And I would even say we focus almost entirely on our members. And it works for us because it has just continued to breed more, whether we wanted it to or not.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because we just focus on them. Hey, what do you guys want? One thing that we have is our member assemblies. We have 2 a year, one in the spring and one in the fall. And, we want 100% of our members to show up. Obviously, 100% of them won't always, but we make the commitment to them that when we get whatever percentage we pick for that member assembly attends, it's because we're saying your outcomes here are going to be what goes into our strategic plan, right? The decisions you make here, and they discuss in small groups, they discuss together. We present the prompts to them. So last spring, it was pain points for athletic training and what we should focus on as an organization. And then in the fall, we had the huge membership survey go out where we surveyed them on, are we serving you the way that you wanted? What are the things that, what are your needs, not just as a member, but as an AT? And then we have the fall assembly where we really discussed those things and got their feedback. So we focus almost entirely on them, and the things we do for our membership. We just realize other ATs will continue to benefit from it. But like you said, and one thing I'll add to that is, maybe it's because we're small, but I couldn't imagine having like 3,000 stakeholders who all wanted things from us. So being small has been really important to us. And we actually crossed 100 already this year. So it blows my mind, but that was part of our goal. So that's been fantastic, and seeing that we're getting rewarded for what we're putting out there. But being able to have a number of people who have expectations and being able to deliver on them, I think is really important at the end of the day. And yeah, I mean, we know that our membership is going to do the outward focus for us. They're pulling from outside and they're telling us this is what ATs want. We depend on them for that. It's why we ask for their feedback all the time. And that is really what curates a lot of what the society puts out.
So one more follow-up question on this, and you just kind of alluded to it, but just crossed 100 members. Congratulations to everybody.
Go team.
Thought processes on as things expand and things might have to change. I don't know if that just happened because a bunch of people did the exciting thing, but yeah, that was impressive there. Way to go, Google. But just thoughts on it as it expands, because obviously if you look at larger associations, the largest one, there's always attempts in some form or fashion, and even data gathering can be very low. Voting turnout tends to be really low. So it doesn't necessarily, and again, you're always going to have some version of that. It's just to what degree. Thoughts that you guys have initially, as things hopefully continue to grow for the Industrial AT Society.
Great question.
And you can say, no, not yet. That's fine too.
Yeah, so I'm definitely, remember what I said about about my leadership journey. I don't even pretend with things. Actually, a little foreshadowing. So we're about to have our board member meeting next month, and that is, you have gone ahead and foreshadowed for them a lot of what we're going to be discussing in that. So one big thing that I've seen, right, and we work with other organizations to help us grow, and one that that's really reached out to help us is the ATChat physician practice. But they invited me to their event in February, and the biggest thing I saw was all of their membership, all their leadership was there. They were all in these awesome matching blazers. I was like, wow, how spiffy. But they were all there in
all by accident, from what I've learned from them. That was not like a planned thing. It just happened to turn out that way.
What?
Yeah, I don't. You'd have to go back, the red blazer thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just kind of like by a spur of the moment just decided that was a thing. Like it wasn't actually like a set thing from the beginning that they did.
Okay, but they didn't like all randomly show up at the same blazer.
No. But it was just kind of like this random, like, hey, this is a great idea. Let's choose red, and then that's how. And now it's just the thing.
I love it. I really did. And it was nice to just see them all in one place, right? My first question was, how did you get all of you together in one place? Please tell me your ways. And I know they get together then, and then they get together when they do their strategic planning later this year. But I think a big thing we're going to talk about is getting together in one place. I think that might tier 2 Hall of Famer, Chris. Nobody knows what that question was, Joel, by the way, on the podcast. So sorry about that. Chris made a suggestion, but that's my comment to that. But I think one of our biggest goals is getting together in one place and really being able to have the hard conversations about the organization, right? It's really hard and VNS does a great job of creating a virtual network and social platform, and Discord's really good at that. But especially as leadership, it's really hard to have hard conversations, commit to some of these reach and stretch goals that you've been talking about, and really look at how we're going to meet the goals of the future virtually. I mean, we do as well as we can, but I definitely think there's something about being together in one place. And one thing that we got to do the first time last year was kind of our leadership guild, but we didn't really make it a priority for everyone to be in one place. That's one thing that's definitely going to change. As we, like you said, model the future and realize, what do we want to change about our setup to make us more successful? So the answer was, I don't know, but it's been weighing heavily on my mind, and we will be discussing it very shortly.
Fair enough. Well, I think the last thing I want to ask is we just kind of wrap up and then open it up to any questions from anybody, is, advice for future leaders, people moving into administrative roles, other contributors in any capacity that they see. What advice would you have for them?
Yes. So I'm going to bleed some of my advice from the personal journey side of my leadership role, right? And advice I have for people. But I would say one thing, there's some quotes that, I kind of thrown in there that have definitely guided me. And sometimes when I journal, first thing is journal. If you don't journal, man, you're missing out, because even if you never go back and read it, the benefit of making yourself face your thoughts and feelings, huge plus, huge win. But one of my favorite quotes is, a second spent feeling sorry for yourself is a second wasted, right? There have been weeks, and not related to the society at all, like just like in life, right, that suck. I mean, work is going terrible, right? Like people are acting out of pocket. You can't hear back from people on things you need to hear back from. Your family is just driving you up the wall. And I have found, and especially this is why I journal, that so much of my energy sometimes can go to commiserating on the situation. And the thing that has really helped me lift to that next level has been wasting zero time on that. Well, zero is a lie. less time, less time on that. So I really, as I've journaled, I've gotten so much better at catching myself and being like, what are we, why are we even thinking about this, right? Let's focus on the positivity. Let's focus on the outcome. Let's focus on what we can do next. And doing that personal journey for yourself is going to help you. If you want to be a future leader, if you are the person who brings positivity, solutions, filling the gap, it will be natural. It'll emanate from you. That person who is always looking for the solution and the way out and why it's okay, they really will find themselves at the front of the pack or leading from behind, whatever side of the group you think you need to be on. You will be someone that people really turn to. And then the other thing I would add to that is find joy in doing the hard things no one wants to do. This can be combing through a spreadsheet looking for some little thing. This can be, and this is where I've seen several of the leaders in the society, right? I don't know if Tiff is on here, but I think she's a great example. When there's a gap or something needs to be done, man, she just finds it. I think I did a webinar for our education, one of our education CU webinars at the end of the year. And I had like sent all my stuff in for, the content we needed and stuff, but I was really in a busy time. I was transitioning into the role I'm at work, and I was doing a bunch of things. And Tiff had reached out and texted me and said, do you need a moderator for your session? And I was too busy to respond. I did not reply. She messaged me 2 weeks later and goes, good talk. I'll be your moderator.
Nice.
And I replied, I was like, man, I'm so sorry. I've been so busy. And she's like, no, I know if it's ever an emergency, like I'll blow you up. But she does that constantly. She will message me something like, hey, do you need this? And sometimes I reply, sometimes I don't. And she does it anyway, right? And so having people who will do the things no one wants to do and you just want to do them. And this is something for us too. And when I say find joy in doing it, I don't see it as a self-sacrificing, I see it as how can you make it enjoyable for you? Like where I am. I know Morgan pointed out my background, but to set this summit up, I would have these 6 to 8 hour sprint sessions I would try to do once a week at least. Not at least, once a week or every other week. And I would do them here. So I'm in one of my work cubes, right? But this was how I found joy in the tedious, detail-oriented work of putting this together. Was I may as well look at something beautiful, I may as well be in nature. I may as well make it engaging for me to be willing to do this. So if you can find ways to find joy in the service of it, even when it's not going well, that's my advice. If you can't steel yourself to have that, then I think you may find the leadership journey fraught with obstacles.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the only thing I would throw on there is always be open to learning. Read whatever it is, podcasts, listen to people out there that you agree with and ones that you don't agree with, because I think that's equally important. So develop some principles and hold them loosely. If there's something there that makes sense to you to adjust, be open to adjusting it and figuring out how it fits. It's too complex of everything in the world and in just that leadership space specifically to remain rigid in that, and treat everything the exact same with everything that goes into it. So those would be the only thing I would throw on top of that as well. Any comments, questions that people wanted to drop in just in the last couple minutes before we wrap up? And I believe that gives everybody the rest of their day.
Yes.
It's 40 and raining in Minnesota, so we're nothing exciting.
I think it's 85 here.
Yeah, it was 81 yesterday.
Yes.
So yeah, Midwest.
The Midwest for you. Great job, team. Honestly, we really pulled this one off. Best VNS yet. Next year is going to be even better. Can't tell you how, but it will be. We promise. But yeah, it's been awesome. And I really, really appreciate seeing so many ATs in one place. VNS is truly a fun environment, and it's fun to facilitate things like this. Joel, I mean, you've done a ton for the setting and facilitating this podcast and environments like this that have definitely been learning opportunities for me. Joel's a reader, if you guys can't tell. He loves to read books. So I like reading your little like synopses and like what you learned. I'm like, thank you, Joel, for reading that book I'll never read.
Right. I only get them from hearing about him on another podcast talking about it. So that's how I get into all my recommendations.
No, that's awesome. I really do appreciate it. But yeah, and thanks everyone for coming and hanging out with us today. I mean, it was a great one this year, so I'm glad.
Yeah, thanks again for the opportunity. Thank you for everybody who signed on at some point, or definitely everyone who stayed through everything. I know giving up Saturdays are always tough, and just in general, but it's awesome the work that everyone's doing, board member and member of IATS. It's really from the outside, again, not a member, not part of it in the industrial setting. Like, it's awe-inspiring to watch just what everything does and the amount of work and everything, the amount of information that gets put out. So kudos to everybody who is involved with it. I'm just happy to play my little role and be connected to you all in some way or another. So
next year, I'm just going to call you up and be like, hey, are you free Saturday? What are you doing? Got something going on? I'm going to make the timeline shorter and shorter this time.
I like loosely know when it's going to be, so it works out okay.
You see the like save the date, and you're like, Susan's probably going to be hitting me up.
Yeah. We'll just make a mental note to keep that one open.
Look, I'm glad we have this annual anniversary that we get to know that we're going to sit down and have a chat with. And it may not be me next year, it may be different members of the organization. I know you've gotten to talk to several of us over the years. So we definitely appreciate you coming together and steering this conversation to wrap it up. And it's a great way to end the show.
Absolutely. Thank you again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Have a great Saturday, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Athletic Training Chat with the Industrial Athletic Training Society and Susan Taah, the president. We hope that it was enlightening for you. Discussions on leadership. If you're in the industrial setting, I highly recommend you get involved with the IATS. They're doing a wonderful job. This project of theirs has been making for years. They are full go on it, adding new things all the time, and doing a wonderful job when it comes to everything to support ATs in the industrial setting. So, hope you enjoyed it. Again, check out Clinically Impressed Co. Ton of free resources, nutrition, performance, otherwise, plus some free CEUs. If that's something that you're also looking for as we're coming up on the reporting year, we'll catch you next episode.